Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get into some fascinating stuff today? We're going to be taking a look at Sean Diddy Combs.
Right.
You know him as Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, just Diddy.
So many names.
The guy has had more name changes than most of us have had hot dinners, right?
Right.
But this isn't just about the names, it's about understanding how he went from an intern at Uptown Records to this larger-than-life figure, and really what his story tells us about the music industry. You sent over this incredible video essay that unpacks Diddy's whole journey, his impact on hip-hop, and like his recent fall from grace. And I think there's going to be a lot here to dig into.
I think so too. And it's a story that's really about more than just Diddy, as the essay points out.
Right.
His rise and fall are deeply intertwined with the evolution of hip-hop, from its early days as a countercultural movement to its current status as like a global, multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, so let's go back to the beginning then. Late 80s, early 90s. What was the music industry like when Diddy first kind of stepped onto the scene?
Well, hip-hop was gaining popularity, but major labels were still largely clueless about it.
Really?
They didn't understand the culture, and frankly, they didn't really respect black artists. Record deals back then were notoriously exploitive.
Yeah, the video essay talks about how artists were often left with barely anything after everybody else took their cut.
Exactly. They use the example of Rakim, considered one of the greatest MCs of all time. He signed to Island Records. But his contract was structured in a way that multiple layers of intermediaries, mostly white executives, siphoned off the profits before he saw a dime.
Wow.
And that was pretty common back then.
So Diddy kind of saw this system, and instead of becoming a victim of it, he figured out how to play it to his advantage.
He was incredibly astute. He recognized that the industry needed people who could bridge the gap between the streets where the talent was and the boardrooms where the money was.
Right.
And he positioned himself as that bridge.
And he had the hustle to back it up. I mean, the guy started out promoting parties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where he honed his skills, built connections, and developed a keen sense for what would resonate with audiences.
Yeah.
He understood the club scene, the street culture, the energy that made hip-hop so powerful. But what's really interesting is that unlike some of the black entrepreneurs who came before him, Diddy wasn't content to just be a behind-the-scenes player.
Oh, so he wanted to be more than that.
He had his sights set on something bigger.
So he wanted to be the star.
He didn't just want to translate hip-hop for the industry. He wanted to be the face of it. And that ambition, that drive to be front and center, that's what really set him apart.
Okay, so we got the industry landscape, we got Diddy's hustle, and then comes the Biggie factor.
Right.
This is where things really take off, right?
The partnership between Diddy and the notorious B.I.G. was a turning point, not just for their careers, but for hip-hop as a whole. But it's also an example of Diddy's strategic brilliance.
Yeah, I mean, Biggie was obviously incredibly talented, but he wasn't exactly the most outgoing personality, not like a natural showman, like, say, Tupac.
Exactly. And that's where Diddy's genius came in. He recognized that he could leverage his own charisma, his energy, to amplify Biggie's talent.
Yeah.
He created this dynamic duo, a package deal.
So he basically made himself part of the product.
In a way, yes. Think about those early Biggie videos.
Okay.
Diddy is right there, front and center, rapping along, dancing, hyping up the crowd. He understood that in a visual medium like music videos, image and presentation were just as important as the music itself.
And that approach extended to the music itself, right?
Yeah.
The video essay talks about how Diddy revolutionized hip-hop production.
Absolutely. Before Diddy, hip-hop sampling was generally limited to using drum breaks or short vocal snippets. But Diddy embraced the use of full song samples, often weaving in melodic hooks from classic soul and R&B tracks.
Okay.
This created a much more accessible, radio-friendly sound that helped expand hip-hop's audience beyond its traditional base.
Yeah, that's true. You can hear that in tracks like Juicy, Big Papa, One More Chance. Like, those became massive pop hits.
Precisely. He took this raw, gritty art form and polished it, made it palatable for mainstream audiences. And that's a huge part of what fueled Bad Boy's commercial success.
Yeah, and then, of course, tragedy struck. Biggie's death in 1997 was a devastating loss for the music world. But it also had a profound impact on Diddy's career.
It's a sensitive topic, but the essay doesn't shy away from exploring how Diddy leveraged Biggie's legacy in the wake of his death.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of rumors and conspiracy theories swirling around at the time. Did the essay address any of that?
It mentions the speculation, but it's very careful not to make any direct accusations or insinuations about Diddy's potential involvement in Biggie's death.
Okay.
Instead, it focuses on how Diddy used his public platform to solidify his image as the heartbroken friend, the keeper of the flame.
Right. I'll Be Missing You was a global phenomena.
Exactly. And it catapulted Diddy to a level of superstardom that even Biggie hadn't reached in his lifetime.
Wow. And that's when the criticism really starts to ramp up.
Right.
People questioning Diddy's talent, accusing him of exploiting Biggie's death.
Yes, there was this growing sense that Diddy was more of a businessman than an artist. His rapping skills were, shall we say, not universally praised.
Right.
And the fact that he relied heavily on ghostwriters, including Biggie himself, further fueled the perception that he was more of a manufactured pop star than a true hip-hop artist.
But none of that seemed to matter to the public. He was Diddy, and he was everywhere.
He became this larger-than-life figure, the embodiment of hip-hop's ascendance into the mainstream. The shiny suit era, as it came to be known, was all about excess. The cars, the mansions, the champagne. And Diddy was the ultimate poster boy for that lifestyle.
And that kind of leads us into the 2000s, right? The era of peak hip-hop excess. But before we get there, I'm kind of curious how you think Diddy's early experiences with the industry, the exploitation that he witnessed firsthand, might have shaped his own approach to the music business.
That's a great question. And it's something the essay really makes you think about. Did he see the industry's exploitative nature as something to fight against? Or did he simply learn to play the game better than anyone else? We'll have to explore that further as we dive into the next chapter of his career. Host. It's interesting, isn't it? You can really see how that exploitative system shaped Diddy's trajectory.
Yeah.
In many ways, he became like the ultimate embodiment of that system, taking it to its logical extreme.
So let's talk about that logical extreme, the 2000s, the shiny suit era.
Right.
It was like hip-hop exploded into this whole new level of popularity. And Diddy was right there at the forefront, kind of driving the culture forward.
He was the maestro of that era, absolutely. It was a time of like unprecedented commercial success for hip-hop, but it was also a time when the music and the culture surrounding it became increasingly commodified.
And hypersexualized, wouldn't you say?
Yes, the essay definitely delves into that aspect. The rise of the video vixen is inextricably linked to the shiny suit era. You see this shift in how women are portrayed in music videos. They become more and more objectified, often reduced to mere props in these lavish displays of wealth and masculinity.
For those who aren't super familiar with hip-hop history, can you explain exactly what a video vixen is?
Essentially, they were the women who appeared in hip-hop music videos, often scantily clad, dancing provocatively.
Right.
Their primary role was to enhance the visual appeal of the video, to add to the spectacle. And the essay points out how the emergence of video vixens coincides with a shift in beauty standards, a preference for lighter skin tones, and a very specific, often surgically enhanced body type.
Yeah, it was all about being slim thick, as they used to say. And it wasn't just in music videos, right? This whole aesthetic was everywhere, magazines, TV shows, even fashion.
Absolutely. And it's important to consider the societal context here. This was the era of the Bush presidency, the aftermath of 9/11, the looming economic recession.
Oh, wow.
People were looking for escape, for fantasy, and hip-hop offered that in abundance.
It was all about excess and escapism.
Exactly. And Diddy was selling that fantasy better than anyone else. He understood how to package and market aspiration.
But it came at a cost, didn't it?
The essay argues that the shiny suit era, while commercially successful, came at the expense of women, who were increasingly objectified and marginalized within the culture.
And it's interesting how the essay connects this back to those systemic issues we talked about earlier. Yeah. The exploitative nature of the industry.
Yes, it makes the point that Diddy, while certainly a powerful and influential figure, was operating within a system that was already deeply flawed.
So it's not like he invented this system of exploitation, but he certainly perfected it.
He was a master of it, no doubt. And the essay doesn't shy away from exploring the darker side of his success. There's a whole section about the allegations of abuse and mistreatment directed towards the women in his orbit.
It's heavy stuff.
It is, and it's something that we as consumers of this music and this culture have to grapple with.
It's easy to get caught up in the beats and the visuals, the whole fantasy of it all.
Right.
But it's important to remember that there are real people behind this music, real lives being affected.
Precisely, and the essay really challenges you to think about the ethical implications of the music you consume.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the music itself.
Yep.
The shiny suit era also saw the rise of these superstar producers. Just Blaze, the Neptunes, Timbaland, who were creating these incredibly innovative sounds.
And Diddy was a master at recognizing and utilizing their talent. He brought in the best of the best to craft those signature bad boy hits.
And he made sure everyone knew who was behind those hits, right? The producer tags became a whole thing.
Oh, yeah, those iconic producer tags. Just Blaze, Timbaland got it, the Neptunes. They became sonic signatures, instantly recognizable. And they added another layer of cool to those tracks.
But even with all the success, the hits, the cultural influence, Diddy's career starts to take a bit of a downturn in the later 2000s.
His grip on the zeitgeist begins to loosen. And the criticisms, which were always simmering beneath the surface, start to boil over.
Then there's the Diageo partnership and the subsequent lawsuit, which really exposes the limitations of even like black excellence within a system that's inherently biased.
That was a pivotal moment, wasn't it? Diddy builds this incredibly successful brand, Ciroc Vodka, helps turn it into a global phenomenon.
Right.
But ultimately, it's Diageo, the multinational corporation that owns Ciroc, that reaps the lion's share of the profits.
And that, I think, is what fuels his black wealth crusade.
Right.
He's calling out the hypocrisy of a system that celebrates black success, while simultaneously limiting black ownership and control.
The irony, of course, is that he's preaching economic empowerment, while facing accusations of exploiting those within his own sphere of influence.
It's a complex situation, to say the least, and it leads to a lot of uncomfortable questions about the nature of success, power, and the limits of representation within a system that's inherently unequal.
And it makes you wonder, is it possible to achieve true liberation within a system that's built on extraction and exploitation?
Yeah, it really does make you think about the bigger picture, right? Like, what does real success look like? And how do we create a system that allows for more equitable participation and ownership?
That's the million-dollar question. I mean, honestly, this video essay doesn't provide any easy answers.
Right.
But it does offer some really interesting insights into how the industry is changing, particularly with the rise of streaming services.
Right. The essay talks about how platforms like Spotify and Apple Music have disrupted the traditional power dynamics of the music industry.
It's a double-edged sword, really.
How so?
On the one hand, these platforms have allowed artists to bypass the gatekeepers, to reach audiences directly without needing a record deal.
Oh, so it's more democratic in a way?
In theory, yes. But the reality is a bit more complicated.
How so?
Well, the royalties paid out by these streaming services are notoriously low. So even if you have millions of streams, you're not necessarily making a lot of money.
Right.
And these platforms are still controlled by these massive tech companies, each with their own algorithms and agendas.
So it's just a new form of gatekeeping?
Exactly. It's like the power has shifted.
Yeah.
From the record labels to the tech giants.
So what does this mean for the future of hip-hop? Are artists just going to be caught in this endless battle between corporate behemoths?
It's a valid concern. But the essay also points to some positive developments.
Okay.
The internet has also empowered artists to build their own platforms, connect with fans directly, and control their own narratives.
Like what Mess is doing with his podcast. Right?
Exactly. And there's a growing movement towards independent ownership, with artists retaining control of their masters and publishing rights.
That's encouraging. It sounds like things are starting to shift in the right direction, but it's going to take a collective effort, right? Both from artists and from fans.
Absolutely. We need to start thinking differently about how we value and support the music we love. Are we simply passive consumers? Or can we be active participants in shaping a more just and equitable industry?
That's a powerful question. So if we want to be more active participants, what can we do? What are some concrete steps that we can take as listeners, as fans?
Well, for starters, we can be more conscious of where our money is going.
Okay.
We can support artists who own their masters, who advocate for fair treatment within the industry.
So like buying merch directly from the artist's website instead of through a big retailer.
Exactly. Or going to see them live if we can.
Right.
And we can choose to stream on platforms that offer better royalty rates,
Right.
even if it means paying a little extra.
It's about putting our money where our values are.
Right. Precisely. And we can educate ourselves about the business side of music, understand how publishing rights work, how contracts are structured. The more informed we are as consumers, the less likely we are to be complicit in exploitative practices.
That's a great point. Knowledge is power, as they say.
And we shouldn't be afraid to challenge the status quo. We can call out misogyny, exploitation, and abuse when we see it, even if it's coming from our favorite artists.
Accountability starts with us.
Yes, we have the power to demand better from the industry, from the artists we support, and from ourselves.
Wow, this has been incredibly eye-opening. It's made me think about hip-hop, the music industry, and my own role as a consumer in a whole new light.
And that's the power of a good deep dive, isn't it? It challenges our assumptions, expands our perspectives,
Yeah.
and leaves us with more questions than answers.
And hopefully it inspires us to take action, to demand better, and to create a more just and equitable world, both within the music industry and beyond.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. And remember, the future of music is in our hands. Let's use that power wisely.